Well, welcome, Julie and Michael, to the Greatest Horseman Podcast. I'm so glad to have you. We're here at the ATFO. For anyone who does not know what the ATFO is, that is the Appalachian Trainer Face-Off. That is the annual event that Heart of Phoenix Equine Rescue puts on for their horses. So what that looks like is throughout the year, these horses are fostered by trainers who take their time, they invest their money, their sweat, their facilities, their horsemanship into these horses. They pour so much into them so that the goal is that these horses can get adopted out and hopefully find forever homes where they're well taken care of and can live out the rest of their years. But because of the horsemanship that they put into them, these horses are more likely to be safer and be able to fit with the families that they go to. So we've had the pleasure of judging this weekend, and it's been a lot of fun. Really quick before we dive into some other stuff, tell me a little bit, you guys, have you enjoyed the weekend and the judging and all of that?
I have really enjoyed it. I have been here multiple times. Well, I don't know how many, but since the very beginning, and we've missed, I want to say 2, maybe 3. I think Tania said last night that it started in 17. This is the 9th one. So I guess we've been here somewhere around 6 or 7 times at this point. But this is the first year that I have judged myself along with Michael, each of us being individual judges. He's always come and judged, but we were kind of together, and so doing it a little bit together. But it's been so fun to see. To see just this weekend, but then also the progression over the years, because it really has grown in the sense of the horsemen and the horsewomen that show up and the product that they're putting out.
That's pretty cool, yeah. And I heard you talking about like even some of the competitors, the trainers that you've just followed for a long time and seeing how they grow. How does that make you feel being a part of this and seeing these guys grow and blossom? And
it's so cool because you've seen their confidence grow, and you've seen what we call baby trainers turn into great trainers. And then too, in my opinion, it's the coolest to see these trainers that are just committed to helping the horse and helping, they come year after year because they know that what they're doing matters, and they know that they're making a difference. And so to me, that's just seeing the heart of the horse industry at its best, and I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of the same, as Julia was saying, is, watching their businesses thrive and just get better and better in their product that they're putting out as far as the horses that they're doing, and it's just so much fun to watch them grow, because it's kind of like anything. Like, we don't normally get to be in, and I wouldn't even say we're overly in a mentorship role to these guys, but we're just kind of at that spot where we can watch them just as much as the horses all weekend, and see what they've done and how they've grown and how they've put more effort into it. And, it is a commitment, like you were saying, it's their facility, their money, their time, their effort, all those things that they're putting into these horses to make them adoptable. And it's just such a cool idea program, that that's kind of why we keep coming back is, that's kind of what it's about. Making horses better for everybody.
That's awesome, and that's so cool that you guys, like, year after year after year, you come back and you pour in and you invest, because it's also your time and effort and all that. So that's pretty cool. So, well, let's switch gears here because I want to dig into like the stuff that you guys have been working on. So what do you guys have that's going on that's new? What are you focusing on right now? What's happening at your facility? What are y'all doing?
Well, we're in the showing. We've started, kind of branching off into cows and some of the cutting and the rain cow stuff,
Okay.
And when I say just starting, I mean that we are just starting. I am by no means know what I'm doing, but I'm just giving it an old shot. I'm just in having a good time, probably look like a wild redneck, but I have fun with it. So, and for me, it was just something different that I could do that was not always so overly structured for me, because I have Joey will tell you, I have a hard time always being super detail oriented every single moment of every day. So to me, that's a little bit more like, you get to do a little bit this, but then, you kind of let something else take over and you kind of just go along. So
I get it.
we're starting in that. we have the training horses, we have our breeding program, we have, our clinics and our lessons and our showing, and so we have a lot going on, but it's been pretty great.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. We kind of set out several years ago. We had, only ever done clinics and had helped a lot of showmen and had guided them, especially through problems and, starting horses for them and all of that. But then several years ago, we decided hey, we wanted to start doing the performance. And for us, we kind of saw this gap between the horsemanship world and the performance world, and recognizing that there could be a bridge there. There needed to be a bridge there. There's phenomenal horsemen in the horsemanship world, and there's phenomenal horsemen in the performance world. But they can be, I think, merged a little bit more than they are currently. And so, some of those performance things, if we took a little bit more horsemanship into it, maybe we could do it in a little bit better light. Maybe we could make it a little bit easier on these horses, get rid of some of those old school cowboy methods. And so that's kind of what we sought after and set to do is, okay, let's do this performance thing, but let's try to do it with keeping the horse in mind. And how can we use what we've learned in the horsemanship world and take it here? And then, of course, how can we better ourselves in the performance world? And I think that's what Michael and I have really worked a lot too, is, we had been in that horsemanship so much, but how do we become better showmen ourselves, better performance trainers ourselves, and just take our horses to that next level? And that's what I feel like we've spent this past several years really doing, which has taken a step back from as many clinics because we've been showing. We teach about 2 clinics a month, but we show about 2 shows a month.
Sure.
And so it's been very busy in that sense. But man, we've learned a lot.
Absolutely.
We've learned a lot in the process and been able to see these students really grow in what they've learned. So it's been fun, but
yeah,
it's been a journey for sure.
Well, and to us stepping outside our comfort zone, it's. We say it, to a lot of our clinic participants or our riders or anything like that, you got to step outside your comfort zone to grow.
Yeah, sure.
And, I showed many years ago, but got out of it, kind of got burnt out on it, and then, have re-stepped back in and, kind of embracing being a beginner back in an industry. Kind of going through everything. I ask a lot of the guys and gals up there that are, phenomenal trainers and everything like that. Hey, what's some advice here and there and stuff like that. So almost being, practice what you preach kind of a thing, is definitely a part of it. Is I'm going and I'm not very always comfortable in all the things I'm doing, but go out and I'm taking lessons and, going through those things and just trying to be more well-rounded, and that's what I think everybody as a trainer should endeavor to do, is step outside your comfort zone. It's not easy for sure.
Right.
I probably, complain and whine more than I ought to, but
was it QYB?
Yeah, exactly. I really need to maybe tattoo that on my hand or something. Be like, oh man, okay, here we go. But it is, and it's just like what we ask these trainers at the ATFO to do, is they have their specific thing.
Yeah.
And then they're coming into a competition setting. We're asking these horses to do quite a bit and be uncomfortable, but embrace the change, embrace what happens. So in some respects, I've needed to do that as well on myself, as do something different than I normally do. Pay attention to details where it's more rough for me to do all the time.
Sure.
And I'm thankful, and just incredibly lucky that I have Julia at the house, and my assistant trainer is a heck of a set of eyes that can always be correcting me. And it's certainly not easy. It's certainly not easy to, kind of step into that role of being the coach that's coached. So you kind of get those parts, kind of they'll weigh on you a little bit, but at the end of the day, it's what needs to happen. It's really what needs to happen to continue to grow. But it is. Yeah. If growth was easy, it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be hard for everybody to do.
That's for sure. What would you say to somebody if there's a trainer, a horseman out there, someone who is, working with horses and are thinking about getting their feet wet and showing, but they just haven't made the leap, what would you recommend?
For me is, do the lessons or the eyes on the ground. We say it all the time. It's the blessing and the curse we talk about with me and Michael and then Jacob, our assistant trainer. We always have at least 2 eyes on us, if not 4. And so eyes on the ground are so important because a lot of times when you're learning something new, you think you're doing one thing and you're just not.
Sure.
It's one thing to see it, it's another thing to do it. And so having that eye on the ground, watching you and saying like, hey, I don't think you're doing what you think that you're doing, is so important. So those lessons are just so incredibly important. Of course, we love clinics and we're a big advocate for clinics, but that consistent routine eye, and normally you want a consistent eye because somebody that's going to hold you accountable but keep you inspired in the process. And that's what I think that I've been very grateful for in having Michael and then having Jacob and then even other people in our barn who are doing the same things. Is you can't, there's not a lot of room for you to skirt by and not get called out for something. And that is important, having those people that you trust and but that you're willing to listen to. And it is uncomfortable because you feel like you've always got judging eyes around, but it's not judging in a sense of anything other than like, how do we get better? Like, how do we all better ourselves and keep going? And I attribute a lot of that because we have such a good system. So when you get in that show pen, having that system is important because the show world has so many incredible qualities to it, but it also can be brutal. And so you want a system when you walk in there, ready to. You're putting, you're going into a pen to be judged. And that's the whole point, and that's always going to be challenging. So if you have that system to support you and say like, hey, we can keep going and seeing what you can become and believing in what you can become is important. Because it can get challenging to go in and out and what am I constantly doing wrong? But that's the point. The point isn't to go in there and prove that you're right. It's to go in there and get better. And eventually that comes.
And that kind of brings us full circle because you mentioned about like the mirroring of horsemanship and the performance side of things. How are you finding that the performance, like how are you finding your horsemanship impacting what you're doing on the performance side? And then also how the performance experience is impacting your horsemanship?
For me, the horsemanship was always, something that we believed in and felt very strongly in what we were capable of doing. But going into the performance world has just really helped in the overall presentation of a horse. Learning more about the performance and the collection and the muscles and how they hold themselves and how they go has just, in posture for people and horses, I would say has really elevated our horsemanship because, we have the longevity of the horse is now so much better. Whereas when you have a nice posture and a nice frame that is trained, not fixed, not a fixed frame that we're like using it out of tension and braciness, but a posture that is trained in, that they want to be in, really kind of like just melted in the horsemanship world because it helped them so much, both physically and mentally. And then of course the horsemanship world has helped the performance world so much with you don't have to, pull and kick them into a frame. You can teach this posture and they can learn to maintain it without a lot of harsh cues. Of course they need good leadership and clarity of cue. But it really did help a lot in the sense of we can teach our horse to do these things and they enjoy it. I think that was a big thing. It's I want to have a horse that can enjoy this for the long haul and stay wanting to do it. I don't want to go in the pen and this horse just hate it. And I think that's what we are always setting out to do. And of course we don't always do it right. That's the whole progression of learning, but we're certainly trying to, every horse do better and better of how do we create that performance horse that likes his job and is good at its job.
Gotcha.
And I would also say that, the show world has definitely helped me specifically raise my expectations because when I'm doing in my horsemanship training, I have so much time to make sure something's right. Whereas now my expectations of what I'm teaching my horse to do, like let's say make like a left lead lope transition, I'm not going to over manufacture or manage everything that's happening. Like when I'm going here, we're taking a left lead lope and it's going to be good. So it's really helped me, I think, in my riding and my training, do the job, but then start asking my horse to take some accountability in that spot too. And, hey, we're going to do this here. We're not going to always know exactly where we're, like if we're in a rail class or something, when they say lope, you might not be ready, but you're getting ready to go. You got to start going.
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting.
And some of those things, and just precision points, I think, too, for sure.
And I think that kind of is what I was thinking about, is the precision of what you have to do to show. The whole goal is to go in and look like you're doing nothing, right? And so in having that as the goal is like, okay, how do we get this idea across to this horse and make it this precise and this subtle of a cue? We started realizing that horses, would so much better prefer that. And so then they start seeking that. And because your cues get so small, they're listening so much harder, because it's like you're, whispering to them all the time and they got to pay attention to it. So then it really, the performance world certainly has helped our horsemanship as well, because you realize how small you can make a cue if you have a horse that's really tuned into you. And so I definitely think people always come in and say, I just want a trail horse, or I just want this. And I was like, well, at the end of the day, if we treat every horse in the sense of somewhat of a performance background, the horse is going to be happier. If I don't have to touch a rein to do this or do that, or barely touch it, and I can just use my seat or, my look, and that horse respond, then that horse is going to be better off for it. They don't want me having to pull and kick any more than I have to either. So it definitely was, it's like, okay, it taught us, I think, even more clarity, whereas maybe we thought that we had really clear cues before, but now it's like, okay, how do we get our cues so clear and so consistent that not everybody's going to even know what we're doing? And the horse seems to always enjoy that, at the end of the day. And it creates an easy horse to ride for the general public. So a lot of our amateurs who maybe don't love the performance side, but just like to have a nice horse, do really well with that, because the horse is just simple in what we're doing. We definitely don't want to overcomplicate things, which is easy to do when you get into the performance world. It gets easy to overcomplicate one. And that's definitely something we try to do. It's like, how do we get this done, but keep it as simple as possible so that the normal person can do it?
What's your trick for that, for keeping things as simple as possible? Like when you come across something, you're like, this is maybe getting a little bit complicated. Let me reevaluate this. Where do you go back to? What's your process look like for that?
Probably getting outside opinion, as far as like either I'll call Julia or I'll call Jacob, or we'll have a clinician come in and do it, like an outside clinician that is maybe in the performance world or something like that. And they're like, why are you doing so much? Where again, it really boils down to the eyes on the ground and the support you have around you is kind of, for us, I think, one of the biggest things, because even us in the barn, we might all get kind of in on the same wavelength.
Sure.
Then you have somebody else come in and you're like, why are you guys working so much or doing so many things? And you kind of have to have different opinions, and I think that's where the showing helps, is like, you go out there and it's like, you might think you're making a really nice turn, but they're like, oh, you're over cueing so much or something like that, I think, maybe.
And two, I think the clinics, one of the things that has helped us so much is we have had the joy and the honor of teaching so many individuals. And, especially when you're doing clinics, you get 10 to 15 every weekend, and you do that for 10 years. You've got a lot of people and a lot of thought processes and a lot of different styles of riding that you've seen.
Sure, yeah.
And so when you're trying to learn to make it simple, we've had the ability to watch so many different people. It's like, okay, how do I get this done, but how do I get this type of rider to be able to do it? Because one of the things that I think every trainer, at least in our situation, because we talk about it all the time, the better you get as a rider in general, but certainly in the performance world, you get better at masking things, right? Like you get better at manufacturing things. You get better at getting things done without, holding a horse together.
Sure.
And, it's easy to get comfortable doing that, but then you create a horse that you're the only one that can ride.
Sure.
And so that's something that, in the clinics, a lot of times our horses have to work, but then I have to hand it to Sally Sue and say, okay, I need you to feel this here. And it's, that's a big thing for us, is like, okay, now I need you to get on this horse, and I want you to ask it and see what happens and see how that horse does. And so I think that that's been something that, because of the clinics and the environment that we're in, we've just been able to do that a lot. And so you're constantly like pop quizzing yourself of like, okay, I got this done, but can this person get it done or that person get it done? And we do that a lot, meaning, we ask people, and then it's like another evaluation of, okay, that was too challenging for them to get that done. And that's, certainly not every horse is for every person and every rider. So you can't do that all of the time, but that's certainly a big goal for us. I think every time that we're training a horse, because we've seen so many riders and gotten the opportunity to meet so many riders, and the nature of just what we do, we are trying to train that horse for the next person. We're not trying to train that horse for us. We're trying to train it for the average person to be able to get done. And so that puts a lot of responsibility on the horse, not so much responsibility on me. Because at the end of the day, if you send me a horse and I can go win the world on it, but the owner can't ride it and do anything with it, it defeats the purpose of why the owner has that horse. And so we try to really stay true to the fact that we are training for you. You are not buying a horse for us. And that's just because that's the nature of us teaching and what we do, and that's our passion. There's lots of trainers out there who are training for themselves because they're really good at it, and that's a good thing. If Michael and I said that we wanted to have the next level for Rainer, we would send that to somebody who needed to train for themselves to create that horse. Those trainers that are doing that are doing what they're supposed to be doing, but in our world, that's not what our goal and our passion is education. And so in creating that horse for people and for people to elevate their horsemanship and their skills. So it's just a different approach because it's a different end goal.
Gotcha. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because, you guys are so talented as far as not just the work that you do with horses, but your ability to teach and to really convey a concept or an idea to people, right? And so, especially in the performance world, since I feel like it's becoming more popular for people to kind of dip their toe in, and people are becoming more interested. I think mostly Yellowstone.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
And so like people are like, oh, I want to try this. And I feel like you guys are filling a hole that is needed to help bridge that gap, to help people bridge from people who might have just been in horsemanship and want to do exactly what you're doing. And so I think I'm really excited about that for you guys. I think it's going to be incredible.
It's a hard process because what we're doing is trying to educate people to no longer need you.
Yeah.
And
Right?
sometimes that can be hard, but we have to stay true to that. Our goal is because we're not after the showing as much as we are after creating people who can go show. So it's just a different thought process.
Yeah.
And so. But it can be hard, and like I said, we're still trying to get it right. I think we'll spend a lifetime or two trying.
I agree.
Well, that leads me into, I want to talk about your work with working with people and fear, right? And you guys have the Ride Fearless program. Tell me a little bit about that, how that started, how it evolved, and what you're doing with that.
Yeah, I was just talking to one of the other judges. I said it was one of the most convenient times of my life. And what I mean by that is I really can't tell you exactly like what set it on. In my program, we talk a lot about justified and unjustified fears, not in the sense of negative versus positive fears. Even an unjustified fear, that I don't want anybody to ever have a negative connotation with that. Like unjustified just means that, there was a horse 20 years ago that scared you, and so now you put that fear on every single horse that you ride, no matter whether or not that horse deserves it currently.
Gotcha.
And so I dealt with the majority of unjustified fears. I think it was when I met Michael, I was this blonde girl who loved to ride bucking horses and trick road, and at the end of the day I was pretty ignorant. And so I think as he started doing clinics and we started growing and I got older and then we got married, I just started to become more aware of what horses could do. And we had a lot of problem horses, at that time. You were doing anything you could to make $1. And so if that meant working with the rankest horse you needed to work with, and that's what you did. And I just watched a lot. Consider myself to be very empathetic, so I just felt like I kind of took on a lot of the emotions of owners that came in, and this fear just kind of started a little bit, and then it just began to snowball. But with that being said, that was the inconvenient part of it, because I was a professional at that point. It was very hard to consider yourself a professional and try to help people when you're battling the fear yourself.
Sure.
There was definitely a sense of imposter syndrome going on there. Like, how am I going to help you if I'm also scared of your horse? But then it just, for me personally, sent me on this journey of, well, how are we going to fix this? I was already married, and we were dedicated to this, and I'm not much of a quitter, so I was like, I have to fix this. And so that sent me down a rabbit hole of, okay, now I have to understand I'm a nerd and a geek when it comes to science and, biology and all that. Before I met Michael, I was going to be a vet, and then realized that I could help horses in a different way. So, veered off of that path. But I just dove in hard, like, what is fear? Where does it exist? Why is it there? What is our body telling us? How it exists in our body. And in doing that, I realized that us and horses are really not much different. And so I got really good at my groundwork and understanding the nervous systems of a horse. And really, horses, for myself and my journey, I was never unconfident on the ground, so that never bothered me. So because I was comfortable there, I spent a lot of time there.
Sure.
And I started realizing that, I'm only scared of horses that are justifying my fear, right? We were having these problem horses come in, and it's like, yeah, I'm not the bravest person in the world anymore. So, like, when you send me a bucking horse, I don't want to just get on that, and I don't want to just ride that out. Like, how do I train this well enough that hopefully doesn't become a reality?
Right.
So
you did it many times.
It set
awesome.
me on a journey in how to regulate a horse's emotion, how to just regulate everything that they have emotionally and physically. And then the more I did it, and the more I did it, and the more I learned about posture and the sympathetic and parasympathetic in them, the more I realized that they were in turn reflecting right back what I needed to know. I just needed to do the same to myself.
Yeah.
That was the hard part.
Well, there are a couple things that you mentioned that I think are a lot of things that you mentioned that are so powerful. I'm going to pull out a couple of them. One is that you mentioned about, like, understanding fear in the body. You didn't say, like, in your head and in your mind. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So with my program and what I've learned, and I think, like I said, I think I'll spend a lifetime learning more about this. But we have this thought process that fear is in our head. And it really is not. It shows up in our head, right? Our fear shows up there. But it starts in the body. And I learned a lot about posture and how, I had all these coaches that were well-meaning, and they weren't, like, coaching me every day, but were giving help here and there. You got this, you're enough. Cheerleaders is what I call them.
Gotcha.
Which is an incredibly well-meaning person, right? But for me, when I was in that position and people were cheerleading for me, that was the hardest thing ever, because it's like, you believe I can do this, but I don't know how. I don't have anything to do it. Now I can't do it. Now I'm down this, like, defeat. You're not good enough. Like, you're never going to work through this. And so I was like, what are tangible tools to fix this? Because you cheerleading for me isn't enough. And that's when I got into the posture work and realizing that if your body is in a specific posture, and your psoas muscle, which is what we talk about as being the emotional brain. So your psoas muscle really is what regulates your nervous system. So if your psoas muscle, which is a muscle in your hips, is in a specific position, it doesn't matter what you tell your head, you're not going to be able to get out of that sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight. So if you have people and in horses in specific postures, if you can't get them out of that, then you're not going to have much success in ever getting them to be in that rest and digest in that parasympathetic nervous system. So that's where I learned a lot about, like, okay, what are tangible tools to do that? We can't tell a horse to take a breath. You can't do that with them, but you can change posture. I can tell my students to change their posture. And so that was where I went down, learning about how do I change. And still, it comes with a lot more than just that. Unfortunately, you can't just change your posture and fix it. There's a lot of stepping stones in there, but posture is so big in horses and in people. And horses really are what taught me that more so, because I started changing the posture in the horses. And then I was like, well, this is working so well. Surely this is the same in us. And it's the exact same. So it's not really a mental game in that sense of, if you have the bad posture it doesn't matter how much you tell yourself you're enough or how much you tell yourself you can do it.
Yeah.
Your body and your brain knows that your body knows that your brain lies to you all the time. There's, statistics to say that the average person, I don't know how many, but it's like several thousand lies that the brain will tell you a day. In the terms of assuming something or reading something incorrectly, your brain is constantly lying to you. So your nervous system knows to rely on what your body is telling it, because the brain is unreliable in that sense. And so we have just found you fix the body and everything else falls into place a lot easier.
Yeah, like that is so powerful. And when we think about like how emotional horses are, right? And how that movement, right, is a big part of that emotion, right? And you can tell what a horse is thinking or kind of where their mind is based on what their body is doing.
Absolutely.
And so it makes a lot of sense, right? That what you're describing, that's incredible. And I don't think people realize just how powerful that is. Your posture, your breathing, your presence, all of that has impact because they're so intuitive.
Yeah.
They read all that stuff, all the small little stuff that we think is like just incidental. It's so meaningful.
Yeah, I mean, several years ago, I would have not known. That's why I say that the fear was the most convenient time of my life, because I'm so grateful that I went down that journey. I really do think that I needed to go down that journey, one, to be able to help other people, but also to fully understand. It's hard to help somebody with fear if you've never actually understood the level of fear that you can get. And when I say that I had fear, I don't really deal with it near like I used to, which is the blessing, right? Like, I had what I would consider fairly substantial fear. I didn't want to trot. Being outside of the arena was really, really hard for me. Michael was really the only one who truly understood how scared I was. And it was a very challenging, I think had I not been in the professional world, I probably would have quit, because it would have just been easier to quit. And I didn't know if I was ever going to get past that, but I did. Now, I am still cautious. I like to say I'm just smart and I don't want to get hurt anymore. So what did somebody say? It was like, I'm aware of my mortality.
My own mortality. Yeah.
Generally a good idea.
Yeah. So I don't want to ever say that I am fearless. And that's why when I have my Ride Fearless course, there's a dash in there because it's Ride Fearless at the end of the day, because fear is your body trying to keep yourself safe. And that's important.
Yes.
Because horses can be dangerous. But learning everything that we did with the posture and how much they're able to change. And at the end of the day, horses are just so adaptable, so much more adaptable than people are. They crave peace above all else. So, they really, like I said, they really help mirror the change in me. It didn't start with me and then me with the horse. I kept helping these horses. And then in return, they helped me, which was a really cool thing.
That's awesome. Another thing you mentioned is like how much groundwork, how much you can get done on the ground. I feel like it's getting better now, but I don't think people realize just how much you can accomplish on the ground.
Yeah.
And for a lot of horses, in fact, for most horses, it just makes you so much safer, so much less likely to come off that horse and hit the ground. Talk a little bit about that, because that's no small feat when you're dealing with, a lot of people are like, well, how can groundwork help with a bucking horse, or a horse that's bolting, or a horse that's, tell me a little bit about that.
So the groundwork for me is such an emotional regulation thing. And so I have like three questions that I ask myself for every horse, and Michael, we do.
Okay.
And this is kind of like my pre-flight checklist, meaning the things that I want to make sure that I've accomplished before I'm going to move on to any type of ridden work. And that's whether my horse is mentally engaged, whether my horse is relaxed, and whether my horse is responsive versus reactive. I think there's a lot of horses out there that we see reactiveness as a response. And so we see horses doing a lot of things from a fear-based rather than answering. And so like the best way that I know to explain that is like if I'm asking a student, most people, what 2 + 2 is, they know beyond a shadow of a doubt with no anxiety that like that question doesn't produce any anxiety. The answer's 4. And so I want to get my horse to the point that every time I ask a question, in the beginning, and they're very simple questions, like a 2 + 2, that answer is 4. And I don't want to see it like their fear and they're tense and they're responding because it's a fear-based reaction versus a response. So the groundwork for me is to answer those 3 questions. And as long as I have those 3 questions answered, I can move on to whatever sense. Now, of course, I have lots of tools that I like to have in my tool belt before I ever go to riding. Michael and I are big on, I don't like to get in a car that doesn't have a steering wheel. I don't like to get in a car that doesn't have I don't like to get in a car that doesn't have brakes. And so, when we go to get on a horse, those things are already put in before I get on. I'm not saying that you can't teach a horse to get on and do it in a round pen or whatever, but it's just not our style.
Just hold on and
I like to make sure that my brakes are well installed. My left to right steering is well installed. We have shoulder control when we get on, and we do that all from the ground. Now, I do a lot of groundwork for those reasons, but it doesn't mean that I spend hours upon hours upon hours on the ground. I think as we've gotten better and better, we've been able to do those things much quicker because we're just very clear and concise in the cues that we do. And every horse is different.
Sure.
But I'm not somebody that, I think in our program that we just spend a lot of time boring a horse on the ground. Like my groundwork is very intentional. It is very precise. And it is a means to move on. But those things have to be in place. Like if I don't have those 3 questions, if my horse isn't relaxed, if they're not mentally engaged with me and they're not responding to me, then I'm not going to get on. Because in my opinion, you're crossing a threshold to the horse and you're putting yourself up in a position that's, it's just dangerous. And at the end of the day, our goal is to stay in this industry a long time. And I don't want to be broken before I'm 50. And there's still always danger in it and always risk. But if I can do as much as I can to take that out, then I'm going to try my best, right?
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to, like, you talk about the justified fear versus unjustified fear. Getting on a horse that's not ready, that's a justified fear.
Absolutely.
And that's a preservation mechanism to help. That's where the brain is actually helping you and telling you a truth instead of a lie. To help you say, okay, well, what can we do differently? So that when we do get on, like, it's not going to be a rodeo, right?
Yeah, the way that we like to think about it is we want to ask questions that the horse can easily say yes to and wants to say yes to. I never want to fix a problem in a problem if I don't have to. I don't want to fix the rearing horse in the rear. I want to fix those things outside of it. So, if I have to fix a problem in the problem, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but normally I haven't set up the cues at some point unless it's just a really, really ingrained problem. But I really do like to just ask those simple questions and teach that horse to want to answer and to be comfortable answering those simple questions. We have a big saying of what you focus on magnifies. And so I try really hard to magnify the things that my horse is doing really well and to build their confidence in that and, not to get to the problems unless I absolutely have to. And, like I said, it doesn't always work, but that's certainly the intent. I don't want to fix a bucking horse in the buck. I want to redirect and give them something productive to do, and hope that the bucking never comes to be a part again because they're so focused on what it is that they're saying yes to rather than everything they're saying no to.
Yeah, sure. And point in case, when you were working with that yellow horse, the first thing you started doing is working on softness, getting that horse to stay with you, to lead. You didn't just go to like flagging the horse to see, are you going to kick or not? You established some communication and got a bunch of yeses out of that pony.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the big things, like when Julia was going through it, like I think my horses that were coming to get started, they've never been more prepared for me to ride them than that
I
point
take that
in time.
very seriously.
Right.
I do a lot of the groundwork for Michael to then start, just because I love it. And I think that's where, because we're a team, there's just things that one of you is just going to like better than the other. And Michael's phenomenal. I mean, you saw it. He's phenomenal at the groundwork, but I love it. I can eat, breathe, and sleep it. So I definitely have them maybe a little over prepared sometimes.
Oh, I loved it. Those first rides.
Like, you are not throwing him.
Right. I know. I mean, and
I like my husband. I'd like him safe.
Well, that was what was so funny, because I was like, when she was going through all that, like we had a bunch of horses come through, and like she's like, okay, I think this horse is good, but I just don't want to do the first ride. I'm like, okay, I'll get on and do it, no problem. And I got on it, and I was like, Julia, this thing is like broke, like it feels good. And she's like, okay. So then she'll get on like halfway through the ride, or go through on the second, third day, and everything like that. So it was a great thing it was a good thing for our program, but wasn't very much fun for probably either one of us to go through the fear.
And I give a lot of credit to Michael in that process, because poor thing, when he met me, I was trick riding. I mean, I was doing all of the things, and then it literally felt like it was all of a sudden, at least to me. And it was like, wait a second, you went from standing up on the back of a horse at a dead gallop to not wanting to trot a horse forward. And even though Michael was confused and didn't know how to help me in that, I didn't know how to help myself in that moment. He was always so willing to put me in front of people who would, or just to be a support system. Like, I never got judged or backlash from that. And I think that was something that took a lot of control on his part, because I know how aggravating it had to have been for him, because it was incredibly aggravating for me. And it took a while because I didn't know what I was doing. That was like a 5-year journey. That wasn't a very small journey. The cool thing about it is, now that I know more what I'm doing, in my students, I see it happening so much faster. It's a much, much quicker process, but for me, it was not.
Well, and it wasn't, I think the only part that was ever the aggravation was when she would get excited at 10:30 when I'm trying to sleep, and she'd be like, hey, this is so cool, you got to hear this. And I'm like, oh, okay.
That's when I was doing most of my research.
Right. Research was at night, and I was like, this is great. I love it.
Well, the other day, I don't even think that Max had realized it, but when Max, one of Michael's best friends, is a big mentor to us in our performance journey as we've been going. And so we went on tour right after we got married, and we went on like a 3-month tour where we were doing clinics all over the nation. And we went to see Max in Kansas, and when we were on tour was when I was at my peak of anxiety. And I don't know, Michael might have talked to me, I don't know how aware Max was of all of that, but I had a mare who there was some justified fears going on in there. She had some pretty significant problems. And I just remember being at where Max was with I don't think they were married yet, or if they were, when he was in Kansas. And that was one of the times where I remember getting the most mad at Michael, unfortunately, because I was like, don't ask me to go on the trail ride. And we went on the trail ride, and that was fine. He was, trying to pull me out of my comfort zone. And at one point, like, Michael trotted off. And I was like so paralyzing scared at that point.
Yeah.
And so Michael had to deal with me being aggravated and angry in that process, because a lot of times, unfortunately, when you're scared, it comes out in anger with a lot of people, because the self-preservation just kicks in, and it's just, it's really hard to get through. But then it was a full circle moment for me, this month, or a couple months ago, Max came back for a clinic, and we're working on reining. And that's one of the things that I think Michael and I have a passion and a hobby for, is we're just trying to get, better performance. And So I'm on my horse, and Max is running at me to kick her in the belly and run as hard as I can at a wall and stop. And, I was nervous, but Max, he was so good at recognizing that. But it was a full circle moment for me, because it was at, several years ago, I was paralyzed to trot and to do this, and now I'm trying my best to run at a dead run and then stop a horse. And I'm like,
Sure.
Okay, we've made some progress. And so, but it's still, no matter what, when you go to that next level, that's not something that I'm really used to. Rundowns aren't something I'm really used to. And so you're always pushing that level, but now that fear is like, okay, it's there, but it's manageable, because it's like,
Sure.
you just, instead of it being, paralyzing and debilitating. But it's taken some work in the process for sure.
And the cool thing about a journey is, you're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that what you're describing is more common than people realize. There are a lot of people in our program. We're working with a lot of women who have different backgrounds of how they get there. So there's some people who the fear just creeps up seemingly like out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. There are other people who maybe they rode for years, and then maybe they had kids and they put riding on the back burner, and now they're getting back into it. Mm-hmm. And there's lack of confidence there. Or some who have had accidents, or maybe just a close call or seen something bad. But, like you said, the brain starts firing off all these things. What would you say to somebody who's found themselves, who loves these ponies, loves these horses, right? But they found themselves paralyzed in that fear, and they don't feel like they have what it takes to take that next step forward.
Yeah, I think any of us who have gone through that have all had that feeling. Like, it doesn't matter who you are. It's like, do I have what it takes to go through this? And the answer is yes. As long as you're okay getting comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to get to where you seek uncomfortable positions. Now, with that being said, I'm a big proponent for riding, where Michael had talked about in the other podcast, riding where you can, not where you can't, or working where you can, not where you can't. A lot of times when you have somebody who is really scared, you need to work on the ground for a while. And, I constantly tell people, you have to ask yourself first, what is unjustified or what is justified? If you're dealing with an unjustified fear, you really need somebody who's going to coach you well. But that's going to be a journey that you're going to embark on, and you have to show up. I tell my students all the time when they do like either my online course or my in-person, when you leave me, you have to be committed to 3 to 4 days a week. Because you can't work through fear once every other week or once a week even. It's not enough time to because you are, in a sense, reprogramming the brain. The brain's job is to keep you safe and to do everything in its power to do so. And the brain struggles between reality and visual, which is why we say visual is really huge. So, for instance, if you're constantly visualizing that one fall that happened 20 years ago, every time you're on the back of the horse, the brain is struggling. Like, did you fall 20,000 times or did you fall once? And, that's where the more we visualize those negative things, the more the brain, it's logging all of that, because its number one goal is to keep you alive. And so that's where the excuses of, I don't want to show up to the barn, I can't do this, that's where those start to come into play, because it's really your brain trying to just keep you from having to go through that. And so for me, it might have only started with riding for 5 to 10 minutes. And that was okay. And I had the blessing of having a trainer when I got uncomfortable. Michael, can you do this for me so I can watch? Visualization for me was huge in seeing, like, okay, I have to believe in my own work and do it. But Michael was kind enough to say, like, I believe in your work, I'll do it for you, and then you can take back over. And so having that trainer there, or somebody that was willing to help you, was a big thing. But, I say all of my students, 3 days a week minimum, 20 minutes a day. That's really all you need. You don't need more than that. I don't need you to do like long hours. I actually really don't want you to, because you end up getting too worn out. The more worn out you get, the fear gets more ability to creep in. But start where you can. And then my big thing is if you're dealing with a justified fear, you really have to have a trainer involved, because so many times fear starts with something that's justified. For instance, I'm not going to be the person that's going to train you to want to get on the bucking horse.
Sure.
I don't want to train you to get on the bucking horse. I want to train you to not have to get on a bucking horse.
Yeah.
And so many times it just depends on what you're dealing with. If you've got a justified fear and you're really fearful, you're going to need a trainer to help you. Now, it doesn't mean the trainer has to do it for you, but you're going to have to put in the work of, how am I going to train this better and how am I going to do that? Certainly sending a horse to a good trainer is the easiest way, but it still means that you got to show up and do your part now, because you're probably going to have an unjustified fear once that horse is trained.
Right.
And you're going to have to work through that on that side too. But so many times, a lot of my students, they come to me and they're working, once a week or once every other week. I'm like, until you're ready to devote to me 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week, ideally 4, this really isn't something that you should start until that has to be the first commitment.
Gotcha.
Because you have to start, you think about how many negative experiences you've had. You've got to start rewiring your brain to positive experiences before it's going to fully let go of what it thinks is correct. Meaning, in your brain's, eyes, you're going to die every time you're with a horse.
Sure. That makes sense. So it's like really being proactive in your efforts.
Yeah.
To work on that fear, and not just like, okay, I'm afraid now, what do I do? Like, you're a little too late to the game there, right? There's kind of work that we have to be, just like you said with the horses. Like, you don't want to just, work on the issue when the issue shows up.
Yep.
You want to work on it beforehand to prepare that horse, set them up.
And the horsemanship side of that is a huge piece, whether it's justified or unjustified. Because at the end of the day, fear is rooted in the feeling of being out of control. It's like being in a car. When I'm driving my car, I'm totally fine. But when Michael drives my car, I'm a little bit more fearful. you don't have control. And so it's the same thing when you're working with an animal, is you have to prove to yourself the level of control that you have. And that's incredibly important in your horsemanship. The more you prove that you have X, Y, and Z as tools, and your horse responds willingly every single time, then you start to get to drive your car that is going where you want to, and that's a big thing. So horsemanship, when you're dealing with fear, is so imperative. That's why it's a 2-piece process. There's the mental side of it, but the horsemanship is equally as important, if not more important. Because at the end of the day, if you knew that your horse was going to stop and turn and do everything right every single time, there would be no reason to be fearful.
Right. And also to proving to your horse that you can effectively control.
Absolutely.
And that it's a safe place, and you're going to be fair, and they're going to get that release and all of that. And so, like, I love what you're saying there, because it gives you that history of now, like, I guess I'd say, like, justified confidence, right? You're not just, it's not like, oh, I feel confident and like, no, you shouldn't be on that horse. Mm-hmm. It's like, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, and my horse knows beyond a shadow of a doubt, that when I'm going to ask like 10 out of 10 times, I'll get a yes here. Yeah. And that feels really good.
Yeah.
Because we all want to have control, like you're saying.
Yeah. And that's where I think it's important having, when you're, especially depending on the level of fear, everybody has different levels. But the higher the level of fear, the more important it is that you're well mounted. So many times I see people that are working through fear and they're just not mounted in the right capacity. And it doesn't mean that horse might not be okay at some point in time, but not every horse is right for every rider. Just like not every rider, we say that all the time, not every horse is right for every rider, and we kind of put that on the horse, but at the end of the day, not every rider is right for every horse.
Sure.
Because we have to then in turn say, like, is my capability correctly matching this? Like, is this horse getting what they need out of me? Yeah. And so we have to look at that from both sides, because sometimes if you have a horse that is really struggling with emotional regulation and is not good at emotionally regulating himself, and then you pair it with a rider who is really emotionally irregulated and not regulating themselves, a lot of times the rider feels guilty for giving up or quitting on that horse. But on the other side, the horse is, in theory, the horse needs somebody. In order for him to be better, the horse needs somebody who is regulated. And we have to look at that from both sides, meaning that, just like every horse is not meant for every rider is not meant for every horse.
Sure.
Because sometimes there was times where I told Michael, I was like, I believe in this horse. I know that this horse can do it. But he can't do it with me because I'm not enough emotionally regulated in order to do it. And so I definitely am a big believer in being correctly mounted when you're working on that, because at the end of the day, horses are dangerous. And if we're trying to be advocate for the horse,
right,
then sometimes we're just not at a stage. There was times I was not at a stage where I was going to be the best person to help that animal, and that's just okay.
Yeah.
And so it's hard, but it's the reality of the situation sometimes.
Yeah, it takes like a maturation and a realization that you're right. Like, not every horse and rider are going to be a fit one way or the other, and it is okay. And I feel like sometimes as trainers, like ego, it's like, well, no, we're going to make this work. You just have to, put your heels up and toes up, heels down. You'll get it. Yeah, you'll stay with that horse.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just not a match.
Right.
Yeah.
It just isn't. Let me switch gears here. So you guys are a horse family. You've mentioned about doing less clinics and now showing. How does that work with not that there ever really is, especially in horses, like a work-life balance? But how do you what's your method to your madness? Like, how do you keep things going? What does that look like for you guys?
I think you're right. There is no such thing as a work-life balance, no matter what capacity in horses you are in. I mean, because they always need you, So I think that thought of a work-life balance for us at the moment is just our life is our work, but our work is our life too, So because we love it, we love what we're doing, we love all the horses we're dealing with and helping people and do everything like that. So I think the best possible outcome is at some point in our life we'll slow down. But I've been saying that for the last 7-8 years too. So, but right now, it's great. I think we get I get more, I guess, charged up in life out of the clinics and everything like that. Which is, I like seeing those progressions. I like seeing all those things happen. The showing has been great, but that's long days. I mean, I tip my hat to every horse trainer that is there at 4 a.m, stays there till 1 or 2 that night, and then gets up tomorrow at 4 a.m. and is right back at it. So I tip my hat to those guys and gals that do that every single weekend, going around chasing the show road and everything like that. So, that's a big thing. But I think, just trying to find for us kind of that little bit of joy in those things that we're doing, maybe the horses that we're putting out, the clinics that we're doing, the people that we're helping. I think that kind of gives us that charge. I mean, this judging a horse competition on the weekend is kind of a vacation.
Sure.
You're still working, but your days are not as early.
Right. Yeah.
They're not as long, and it's kind of almost to that point where, like this morning, I was really pretty glad that they had a horse that wanted to be a little bit of a renegade, and I was like, well, I can at least do something today. And for me, I think that's kind of the idea. Is like, I don't really notice hardly not taking vacations. Yeah. I guess
I definitely think in order, and I'm sure you would agree with this, like in order to be successful in this business or to be in this business, you kind of have to have you have to be willing to do more than what's a normal balancing life, right?
For sure.
The hours are longer, the days are longer, the work is longer. But we just all seem to be, have that horse crazy gene that we just make it work and we keep going. And so, we definitely work a lot, but it's because we love it and there's a passion in it. And one day, like Michael said, that'll probably change and that'll slow down. But right now, even though we're all chasing, similar things, I don't think that in order to do this industry and to do it well and to become the horseman and woman that you want to believe, balance isn't really in there.
Right.
I don't really believe there's such thing as actually balance.
Right.
Managing
you got to be all in.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't be an amazing horseman and be half in it.
There's too much to learn in too little time.
Right.
And so you kind of have to be willing to sacrifice that to do it, and at least while you can. But and Michael and I, it's just him and I as far as a family at this point, and it's given us a lot of time to devote to the business being the baby. But we certainly, go on vacation, at least once every 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. But but there's so much that we want to accomplish in our life. It's like, there's no rest that you're gonna get. Like, because as soon as I sit, I'm like, well, I could be doing something, and it's kind of that way.
And I definitely think we're getting to the stage where we want it a little bit more than we used to. But I just think this industry it kind of demands that out of you,
Right.
and that's okay. That's what we signed up for, in order to do what we're searching to do.
Yeah, we love horses, right? And horses are work by definition.
Absolutely.
And so you love the work. And for a lot of us who love horses are our work. They're also our hobby, our passion. It's all kind of tied into one.
Yes.
So I feel like we're very blessed in the sense that we get to literally do the thing that we love. Most people don't get this opportunity.
Right.
It's a very, very special vocation, in my opinion. I can say that there is a lot of value, though, in the pause and the break. Mm-hmm. A lot of value in the pause and the break. And as I get older, that's something that I value more and more, is when I stop and I intentionally am like, okay, we're setting aside this time. And what ends up happening, though, is in that pause and that break, my mind starts going.
Yep.
And then I just create more work for when I get home.
That is exactly right. 3 days, and I'm like, I can shut off from the horses for about 3 days.
That's where I am too.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, I need to go back.
But I do think that is, like, we always do say the value of, like, when we do take that vacation or whatever, you normally come back with a new outlet,
Yes.
a new plan, a new whatever. So there's certainly value in that. It's just not something that we get routinely, I would say.
Yeah, and I'm not a beach guy either, so
What?
no.
More mountains?
No, it is.
Unless the water's clear.
No, even then, I don't.
Okay, maybe that's me.
Yeah. I would go. Like, I like going to the lake, but I can only go for like an afternoon
Sure.
or a day, maybe. But like in the beginning, when Julie and I were dating and first married, her family goes on vacation to the beach every 4th of July, and it's like a week deal. And, after a couple of days, I'm just walking up and down, just looking for something, to go do. And, it probably would be a really good time for me to read, but, that was never my thought when I was there. So that was always probably a pain to go on vacation with for Julia in the beginning, but
Telling you that horse gene, we're just all a little crazy.
well, yeah, for sure.
little psycho.
Little something.
Little bit, yeah. We're all a little nutty for sure.
Yeah, you have to be in this industry.
You're not joking.
Yeah. When, so for example, like when you are like planning and planning for the future and kind of how you guys are developing your business and your reach and your impact, like what are the things that influence that? Like what are the things that you're looking at? Like for you, what's important? Where do you want to have impact? Where are you wanting to make a difference? What are those values and those things that really inform the decisions that you guys are making on an everyday basis, but also as you look long term at where you're headed?
That's a really cool question. I think for me, kind of like we had talked about last time when I was here, is I think my biggest thought and goal is to, if we can elevate the bottom up just a little bit, the trickle effect that would have, if we can educate more people just to have a really basic, clean understanding of what they can do as far as being a horse person or a horse owner or trainer in their own right.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't need to be the next, top cutter, reiner, eventer, or whatever, but just make a really nice horse so that trainer or whoever they have mentoring them can then go up further and faster and then see where the top goes. I think kind of my general philosophy is if I can lift the bottom up just a little bit, where will the top end up? So I think for me, like, that's kind of been my focus for a long time is everybody that gets into this industry to not have a negative experience in the industry as their first outing, where they maybe got bullied or looked down on by a trainer, and they wanted to quit the industry shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
Because it is work, and it's work for all of us. It's our job and somebody else's hobby for the most part. So how do we make their hobby and our job more fun for both parties, to where they're not, I'm not sour, to like, oh, you just want to come in and do XYZ with your horse. And, how do all the trainers come in and they have a better product that they're going ready to go ride, train, show, enjoy, take on a trail ride, do everything like that. We don't have to deal with the same problems over and over again.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I definitely came into this industry a little bit different than Michael. When Michael started, his family was doing it. He started later in life, and most people think that he been doing this since he was a kid, but he really started when he was 18. And so I lost my father when I was 8, and my mom recognized, because I was starting to get into horses before then, and she recognized that there was something she was not into horses herself. She's like, I don't know what I'm seeing right now, I just know that this looks like it's really helping her. And so I lost him in October, and by December of that year I had my first horse. And so they really helped shape my life in a completely different way. I think that without horses I probably would have been down a very, very different path. And so when I come into it, I very much came into it of how do I give back to the animal that gave so much to me. And that's why I was going to be a vet, right? I was going to be a vet originally, and then I met Michael, and I was like, wait, I can give back to these horses in a different way. And then in the education side, realized that the more we educate people, the more horses we impact, right?
Sure, yeah.
One horse is one horse, but if I educate one person, how many horses is that one person going to meet in its lifetime?
Right.
And so, at the end of the day, it was just like, how do you make a difference? And then to understanding how much they made a difference in my life and giving back to, especially young girls, anybody, but young girls for sure. That's why we have so many, my barn brats. We love them, and, give back, because horses just teach kids and humans so much more than just horsemanship. There's just not another sport out there. We both grew up in sports and we loved it, but there's just not another sport out there that demands the emotional regulation that, being a horseman does. And so it's been so cool to see that in people, and that's where I think I find the most impact is like watching somebody go from, like you were talking about before, the lack of confidence and learning to be confident in themselves. Or like, I love watching my kids go from being very emotionally regulated to learning tools to regulate themselves. Because if they don't regulate themselves, they can't be successful with their horse in the pen.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's very much, the horses have always been my saving grace, because I always know I can read a horse. I feel safe reading a horse, and in the presence of a horse, that area is very, safe and sacred. But then showing people that the same thing can be true for them. So I came at it from Michael didn't get when he was talking about in the other podcast, being a kid and why he's so believes in letting a kid be a kid around the horses. He didn't really get that wee phase that I did. When I started with horses, it was very much the wee phase. I was galloping down roads and gone all day on the back of a horse. We lived out in the country, and so horses were very different for me in the beginning. And so now it's like, okay, how do we put that in, but also bring horsemanship to it? Because Lord knows, I don't know how I survived some of the things that I did when I was a kid, because there was not a lot of thought, and like I said, there was a lot of ignorance involved. I just had a really good horse that kept me alive.
Yeah, you always wonder, why would you give a kid a horse? We got into a lot of trouble, too. A lot of stupid stuff we did.
Oh, gosh.
Those poor horses, God bless them.
That's always what I said and say, too, is God bless those horses.
Yeah,
the ones even I started with, and I was under, really good instruction, and those poor horses, just my experimenting with them, and well, can I do this? Can I do that? And I'm like, oh my gosh, that horse was a saint.
Our kids won't have the experiences that I experienced, because that was a little too far, but still we'll have the hopefully.
Different times back then, right?
Yeah, oh my gosh. Oh my god.
But too, you're also trying to hook the next generation of people into horses, to try to continuously carry an industry. So it's for me, it's let them have so much unbridled fun that they are hooked for life. It's don't make it so rigid and structured and stuff like that. Go on, go try whatever you go do.
But don't die either.
Don't die, just come back. If you got one leg when you come back, that's all right. You still got an extra, but come back and just have the best time you can with the horses, because it is she said, I came into it a little differently. And kind of you and I have talked about before is, my passion was always teaching. I don't understand where it came from, what it was. But I've always wanted in some capacity to be a teacher.
What about teaching ignites you?
I don't know. I have no idea. It's just what my core value is, teach, educate.
To talk about how much of a teacher he is. When I first started dating him, it blew me away, because it's not just a teacher in horsemanship. It's
the skid steer.
Oh yeah, he took so much joy in if there was a skid steer around, or something needed to be done, if he knew how to do it, he wanted to teach me to do it, which awesome. I so much appreciated. But he really is, at the end of the day, a teacher at heart. If he's got something, it's not just horses.
So you're a pretty good hand in a skid steer now?
yeah, whatever it is, but he finds a lot of joy in empowering other people to learn that they can do it too, instead of
awesome.
relying.
That's
and so that,
the empowerment.
Yeah, get everybody, I'm not special with what I do. I've just gone through it long enough that you get to be a fairly good hand at what you're doing. And then, but everybody, we created during COVID, because, that was just kind of a wild time for everybody. You didn't really know what the heck was going on. But in that time, we created a thing. We actually took this year off, but we'll probably bring it back at some point. We did what we called the Horsemanship Challenge. So what we did was, the requirements was in 120 days, was about 120 days. You had to get 90 rides in. Or 60 work sessions in on your horse, and just see what you can get done.
That's awesome.
On your own.
Yeah.
When everything was, shutting down, as far as no clinics, no really going to the barn, the whole thing. How do you, what can you go do in your own? And it was amazing, some of the feedback we got. And we kept that going for a few years, and that was really fun.
And I think, and this is, again, it's always easier to talk about somebody else for them or whatever, but one of the things that Michael had taught me very early on was when he was teaching, that the goal of when we teach is to prove to you that you can do it. Sometimes it's easy. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody's got an ego and it can get in the way at any given time, depending on what's going on. But Michael always impressed me by really, truly believing that, because sometimes I think we can get trapped in that ego mentality and teach in a way to prove that we are right. And, Michael very much imprinted from the very beginning, like the point of teaching. It's why he is constantly trying to adapt what he's saying to what Michael's really good at. Seeing what you want and you want and you want, and okay, let's teach this to you differently, because it comes from so much of a spot of, I'm trying to teach you this because I'm trying to get you to understand that you can do this.
Sure.
I don't want you to understand that you can do it because what I'm doing is right. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's two very different ways. And like I said, I think anybody at some time has gotten trapped in that. But we very much try. And we see that among clinicians all the time. Like, it's just a different thought process. Like,
sure.
At the end of the day, we're not special. We're not, freaks of nature. There are freaks of nature out there, but we're not those. It's just that if we can do it, you can do it type thing.
Yeah.
And I give a lot of credit to Michael for that, because I think that I didn't know how to teach before I met Michael. And Michael has obviously had some incredible instructors with his family along the way and has been surrounded by teachers. But I remember in the very beginning, teaching did not come natural for me. And Michael spent a lot of time coaching me through that side of things. Like, how do you teach? I kind of would beat them with fire hose type things. Like, you can't do that. You can't do that. And so, but I think it's because in his family, it's so important. Like, that's above all else, the most important thing. Like, it doesn't matter what I can do. It matters what you can do.
Right.
And so that's been something that I have taken.
Yeah. My parents and my brother, my sister, my nephews, Max was a huge impact on me when I was young, teaching and stuff like that. And, it was always, none of them ever got annoyed trying to help, and
Sure.
that was huge, because I didn't know, anything. My older sister's favorite story to rile me up is when I first started. So I think I only just started hanging out with my parents, watching them train and kind of okay, what are you trying to accomplish here? Mm-hmm. When I was 18, and the first thing I saw, or I went with them willingly, and volunteered to go to, was Road to the Horse. And I didn't know what it was. At that time, I was like, okay, cool, Tennessee, get out of school for a couple days, drive a truck and trailer across the country. I was like, I'm in. I was like, this is great. And so my older sister's favorite story is it was colder in Tennessee than we anticipated. And I put the blanket on the horse backwards. And she still just riles me up about that. At the expo, oh yeah, for sure. I was all in. I thought it was
not a saddle blanket, like a winter blanket.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's impressive.
No, it was. I was pretty impressed. I just got it on in the straps.
The neck thing worked really good for the horse to lift its tail and use the bathroom.
I had that tail wrapped like a bear cat. But it's that literally is how ignorant I came into the industry, and I can put a blanket on straight now. I'm pretty good at that.
Great. That is awesome.
I know, that is growth.
He's come
right
a long
there.
way.
I've come a long ways.
That was the frustrating part to me when I first met Michael, because I didn't realize that he had only been riding for, at that point, you were 21, I think. So at that point, only a couple years. Now, granted, you had put a lot of time in those couple years when I met him, because he was riding all day and working all day. But I had been riding since I was 4, and I was like, wait a second, how are you this? But when he started, there was no bad habits. There was no, there was beginning stage, but not what I went through.
Tell me about, so when you guys got together, did you guys set out, you're like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to build a business together. What did that process look like? Was it intentional? Did it evolve? Was it planned? What did that look like?
I think it evolved a little bit because, she was still so gung-ho about being a vet. And I was like, okay, we should probably go ahead and break up then, because I was like, my goal is to be out, doing, gone, not sitting in one spot with a vet practice. So she was reluctant there and everything. And then, we kind of ended up going into that. And then I think, as she started changing her career path, she's really been most of the business since we started. It's been a lot on her brain and, taking over that side, pretty well, I think.
Yeah, like we were talking about before we started, when Michael came, as far as on paper, the decision to come to North Carolina was really dumb looking back. He came broke, no money. We didn't know where he was going to live. I was still living at home, so it's not like I had somewhere that he could move into. We were very young, and I was very young. And so when he came, it was just like, okay, I'm coming. Let's hope for the best type thing. And but with that being said, there was no backup plan. So it was like, okay, we did this. You jumped. You left a security blanket, a great security blanket, a great system. And so now what? And so, there becomes a sense of hunger and starvation there that you've just got to do it. Whatever you need to put food on the table and to find where he's going to stay. And we had some great supporters that helped along the way. And, all we knew that he wanted to train horses, and that I was still in school, but I was still running the backside of the business. And then as I went into school in college longer, I realized that I needed to run the business more than being in college, and that I thought that we had something to do, and that's where I wanted to be. And so that's what we did. But it started giving people free clinics left and right and just trying to get people in the door. And we gave so much stuff away at that point, just trying to help. I think I'm a big advocate for when you go into an industry to help, the rest comes along. And
Absolutely.
So we gave away so much stuff in the beginning. We still do. But in the beginning, we would do clinics completely for free just so that we could have the material to post.
Sure.
And give it away and help. And then the rest just kind of came.
Yeah, and that, I think, too, is even, when we started, we didn't even have stalls. We didn't have a facility. We didn't have stalls.
We didn't have an arena.
Didn't have an arena. We were riding in the grass pen. We lived right on the national forest, so we would just, let's go and let's try to train out here. Find a spot in the national forest to go, work around some trees and stuff like that. So when we did our first clinic that, actually paid, money and stuff, we were driving home from Florida, and it was our very first full clinic. And Julia had seen on Facebook that there was this modular stall system, that was for sale. It was an Egyptian Arabian breeding facility that they were just kind of getting out of the industry and whatever. And it happened to be 8 or 9 stalls, but the money it was our entire paycheck that we just made. And I was like, all right, well, we'll just buy them and keep trying to do this. And so we had tarp roofs and everything, and God bless all of our clients that hung with us at the time. We were just doing whatever we could to make it work. And it just kind of kept snowballing, and you kind of get on a path and you're like, we'll just keep going until we have to do something different.
I'm around a lot of young trainers.
Yeah.
And, a lot of young trainers kind of romanticize what it's like to start a training business. And there's a lot more opportunity now, because I think there are guys like you and y'all and other people and that give and give people opportunity to get started and help people get started. But a lot of people don't realize the sacrifice and the work and the risk.
Yeah.
You have faith and you move forward one step at a time because you have to. You don't have any other choice, right? But you don't know what the outcome's going to be.
And I think the problem that I see people do the most is they get into the business and they think, okay, well, I need this and I need this. I need the arena. I need the barn. I need, all of these things from the beginning. And my thing that I've always told trainers is you really don't. you see all the time. Now we find places all the time that are for lease, and you can make quite a bit of money being a traveling trainer and not have a facility at home at all.
Absolutely.
And so I always try to tell trainers to really, really focus on growing your business organically without that heaps of debt. We didn't get our own facility until 10 years into it. And so that was, we leased, and then for a while we didn't have much, and we did a lot of training. And I know a lot of really, really successful trainers who don't have facilities at all. They're constantly leasing. And so that's always my biggest thing.
Like most trainers, yeah.
Yeah, is to really grow organically and to not think that, well, my business, that saying of you build it and they will come is not really true.
Right.
There's so much more to it than that.
I hate that saying.
Yeah, if you don't run your business well and you don't, if you don't, do the things that you need to, they might not come, and it's not worth anything if you're in piles and piles and piles of debt.
Right.
And so it's just let it grow organically and then see where it goes from there.
And too, the other part with young trainers coming into it is it's hard because it's a kind of the world that we live in right now is the instant gratification of just because you decide to go out and train horses does not mean that there's going to be a line out the door.
Yes.
It is like Julia said, you give all your time, your energy for free for a long time, maybe with no possible hope of a return on that time. Right. You're going in and you're just doing it because you want to do it.
Yeah.
And I think, that's a big one because now, even with, people that I meet, we can say that, our assistant trainer has been a huge asset and has just grown so much since he started with us. But like when he started with me, the biggest thing that was what drew me to him the most was he's never like, what's in it for me? Like, what do I get out of this deal?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, sure. I'll come down and work and learn and put in my time. And, he has grown into a phenomenal friend. He has come into being a heck of a trainer himself. I mean, fully could be running his own business, but we're just very lucky that he wants to stick around and hang out and stay with us. And we have another young lady right now that is, I have a feeling she'll be probably in the same boat. She's coming in and turning into a heck of a trainer, and she's a great girl. And, I foresee, them being able to run their own businesses anytime they want to. So I'm just thankful that they're here with us for now. But, that's the other part of the industry. That's kind of weird is you're directly training competition.
Right.
But at the end of the day, kind of like I told you, it's like, I think if you come at it and you think about these people and you enjoy the people that you're working with, even if they go off to do their own thing, there'll always be mutual support.
Absolutely.
Whichever way, because like I never want any of my assistants to leave and think like, he's never gonna, like, I'm gonna recommend them before I recommend most people. I recommend a lot of trainers in our area. If I can't take the horse or I don't feel like I'm a fit for the horse, I'm gonna recommend somebody else.
Sure.
And it's just trying to be in that more collaboration than a possessive kind of type. Like, I don't want to be like, oh, Julia, stop stealing my clients. Kind of a mindset. There's so much in the horse industry. I think the last study was like $122 billion a year industry.
Sure, yeah.
And there is a way for everybody to be successful in it.
Absolutely. And it also goes back to the horses, like your thought process there, right? Because it's like, we want to create a horse that chooses to stay with you, right? Mm-hmm. Not because you've got such a tight lead on them that they have to stay with you.
Right.
And the horse that does have the tight lead on it eventually is going to run away, right?
Right.
And I feel like it's a much more healthier relationship when people can grow and bloom and blossom with no strings attached.
Right.
and they can be a part of the business organization as it grows. There's plenty of room in the tent. Or if they decide like, hey, I want to cook my own tent, like, all right, let me know when you start.
Just build it next door.
We'll give you a hand pitching it. Give you some help there.
Exactly. And I think that's the part. Where in some of the spots, I think that some of the horse industry lacks, and then some of it really shows is like these trainers and assistants that once they go out, they can still have a really good working relationship together. I think that's probably one of the coolest things that I see, and one of the things that I really try to emphasize in our program as much as I can. But we'll just see what ends up happening from there. I really appreciate all the work that they do for me, and do all those things. But I always want them to know that they can call, get advice, get help, how to handle this. But really the big one is, not just in the horse training, but be around for like the business calls, be around for the, how do we deal with the clients,
right.
Be around for those parts and pieces. Because I think that is a part that trainers, that is the one Achilles heel that a lot of trainers will get into a wreck with, is they don't know their numbers.
Yeah.
Right.
That's so true. Justin and I were talking about that yesterday. And I think that is so huge, and to be able to have the team have insight into everything, because it just helps everybody, And you're right, like when you have people who are invested, who are doing a good job, who care, my Lord, it makes everything it makes it a joy to go to work.
Yeah.
Makes everything so much better. And it comes down to the people.
Yep.
And it sounds like you guys are blessed to have a lot of incredible people on your team that work with you guys.
We do now. It took a long time to get, but we have an incredible team right now.
Right.
But I think what happens is, like you mentioned about how much you guys gave, like all of that comes back around. I think that some people, because same thing, we would do a lot of free clinics, I've worked with a lot of rescues. Send that horse, we'll take it for a little bit and help you guys out, or send your trainer out and we'll mentor and work with you guys or whatever. But it comes back, and over the years it compounds.
Yes.
Where you've built a lot of goodwill, and there's trust, and there's relationships.
Yep.
And that is stronger than any check that someone could have written me 15 years ago. Yep. Right? Because now you have a relationship and a connection, and that's so much stronger. It's foundational than anything else. And it sounds like you guys value your people, which is awesome.
We try, that's for sure. They're good people, so it's easy.
Yeah. Yeah, they make it easy to value them for sure. But it is so much nicer when you do have a group like that, because as we've talked about in so many capacities, the eyes on the ground, different talents, different wants to go, and how do I support you going this way, and build you up, It's like, because then, too, it doesn't just support them, but it also makes me think in a different capacity. Sure. You know what I mean? It's like, well, what can I do to help that? Or is that something that will reignite some of my passion? Because like the idea of the horse industry, it's so big, there's always something you can be doing. And there is, like, you don't necessarily need to be the most amazing XYZ trainer to do, but if you're just a little bit better in this area, that's where you can start.
Sure.
And then you can branch out from there and, kind of get all those things done. So
absolutely.
There's
awesome.
Always a spot.
Well, I think this is a good place to end our conversation. Yep. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you guys. I'm glad that we were able to get our time slot and get with one another. And I know we got the freestyle coming up this afternoon. Looking forward to that. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much for having us. We very much love this and appreciate it.
My pleasure.